Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Rudman. I'm founder and artistic director of the Musical Theater Project. And today, all I can say is three cheers, because we're going to be talking about Irving Berlin's 1948 classic for MGM, Easter Parade, which you're going to be watching as part of our new series, Let's Go to the Movies. And we're off to a good start. We did Royal Wedding 2 weeks ago, and we're back with another one this time. And I want to start it this way, and it's kind of unusual. I want to quote for you a few lines of a song that Irving Berlin wrote in 1917. So that's 103 years ago. The song never really went anywhere, but it is still worth quoting. And in just a moment, you'll understand why. This is advice to a girl who has lost her boyfriend, and this is what is sung. Smile and show your dimple. You'll find it's very simple. You can think of something comical in a very little while. Chase away the wrinkle. Sprinkle just a twinkle. Light your face up. Just brace up and smile. Now, the thing is, you know the song if I do this to it. Smile and show your dimple. You'll find it's very simple, etc., etc. So here's what happened. The song didn't go anywhere in 1917. He put it in a trunk. In 1933, he was working on a Broadway review, and he decided to pull it out of the trunk, and he threw away the lyric, and he edited the melody a bit, and he came up with, as you well know, In Your Easter Bonnet with All the Frills Upon It. Big, big hit in 1933, and it kept being a hit for lots more singers from then on, but never more so than in 1948, when it became the title song for Easter Parade at MGM, produced by the great Arthur Freed and starring, as you well know, Fred Astaire and Judy Garland in the only musical they ever made together, plus Peter Lawford and Ann Miller and others. Irving Berlin said, and I think this is a great point, he said, a song is like a marriage. It takes a perfect blending of the two mates, the music and words, to make a perfect match. It took a divorce and a second marriage to make this song a happy union. And of course, it is a very happy union that remains with us all these decades later. Last time when we were talking about Royal Wedding, whose screenplay was written by Alan J. Lerner, I didn't share a quote with you from Lerner about his own writing on that movie, because I didn't want to bum you out. I think it's a good movie, but Lerner was not happy with it at all. I suggested that a bit, but here's what he really said. He said that his screenplay left him in a permanent state of cringe. Now, I still give it a B, but it's not to be compared with Easter Parade. I would challenge any of you to give Easter Parade anything but an A+ for perfection, because that's what we got here. It's more pure entertainment from MGM. They used to call themselves the Dream Factory, with good reason. But I think there may be kind of a little universal theme that's part of this movie, and I don't want to be pretentious about it. It's kind of related, sorry about the email, kind of related to Pygmalion in a way, but let's just put this in personal terms as I ask you a question. Did you ever get dumped by a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and then in the next relationship try to mold that next person into the old girlfriend or boyfriend who had dumped you? Well, I've made that mistake a couple of times in my life, and it really is a mistake. It was for me, and it doesn't work for Fred Astaire in this movie either. He's playing Don Hughes. His dancing partner, played by Ann Miller, dumps him from the romance and breaks up the act they had together. So Fred stupidly tries to recreate her in Hannah Brown, played by Judy Garland. He meets her in a cabaret, and he tries to make her into sort of the next Ann Miller, as it were. And she's terrible, absolutely terrible, until he finally has enough sense to just encourage her to be herself. And when that happens, he falls in love with her, and she falls in love with him. And so there you have the movie. I would say now you don't need to watch it, except you do, because it's so good. There's not a whole lot of plot in Easter Parade, but there's a treasure trove of songs by Irving Berlin. 8 of them were brand new songs. 9 of them date back from the period of around 1912, which is when this movie is set. The movie begins on Easter 1912, and it runs, and it covers a year. The movie ends on Easter morning in 1913, which is kind of cool. And you know, just in case you don't know this, in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, the Easter Parade was a big deal in New York City, strolling down Fifth Avenue. And it was a big deal in part because of all those Easter bonnets. So Irving Berlin couldn't wait to write for this film because he knew the period so well. This was sort of the Ziegfeld Follies period on Broadway. And Irving Berlin did write, I think, 4 editions of the Ziegfeld Follies. And I got to tell you how much he was paid for this. He was such a major figure in Hollywood and on Broadway by the time Easter Parade was made that he was paid a whopping $600,000 to write 8 new songs and to give MGM license to use the older songs from his catalog. And he saw his name up above the title, for heaven's sakes. It says, Irving Berlin's Easter Parade. $600,000. If you translate that into 2020 dollars, he made, where's the number? He made $6.6 million for this movie. And I can tell you that's a lot more than Fred Astaire made, as big a star as Fred Astaire was. So way to go, Irving. He said he loved writing for the new generation of performers. By that he meant Judy Garland and Peter Lawford and Ann Miller. The love theme by Irving Berlin for Easter Parade is, and what a great title this is, It Only Happens When I Dance With You. And it's used several times in the movie. It almost becomes a kind of motif. And of course, just about all of us know a couple of swells in which Fred and Judy play hobos. And it gives Fred a chance to kind of mock his image in, wearing the top hat all the time. I could watch that routine again and again, and I bet you have watched it again and again. Even the conveyor belt that MGM devised to make this work as a dance routine is really inspired. Some of you have heard me say, though, this could be sacrilege, that I think Judy is better in this number than Fred Astaire is. There's just something about Judy. She was always able to throw herself into whatever the routine was or whatever the routine required. And Fred is just a little more reticent than that. But look, they're great together, no doubt about it. In every film, Judy Garland gets a song in which she is totally vulnerable And in this movie, the song is called It's Better Luck Next Time. It's sung to a bartender. A bartender, when she thinks that she has lost Fred um, for good. As Frank Sinatra once said, and isn't this a good quote? He said that every time Judy Garland sings, she dies a little. And that's one reason that we love her, because she was always so willing to reveal herself. This was Ann Miller's first film for MGM. She had been stuck at Columbia for years, and this was a big break for her. And when she does her breathtaking Shaking the Blues Away, which is one of Irving Berlin's old songs, an oldie but a goodie, I want you to know that she had recently broken her back, and she did this whole routine in terrific pain, strapped in a brace. I'll tell you more about that when we get to the Q&A in another week. Quite a memorable story, as you can imagine. We saw Peter Lawford in Royal Wedding 2 weeks ago. Here he comes again. It's a few years earlier. He's so handsome. He's so charming. And he was never more charming than in what they used to actually call a charm song in those days. In this one, it's a fellow with an umbrella. And even though we only see a few minutes of the comic Jules Munchin, who's an actor virtually forgotten today, he was terrific. And he plays a pompous waiter in this movie, and his bit is to actually demonstrate to Judy and Fred how to make a salad. And every second of this routine is inspired. Jules Munchin is best known probably for his MGM movie On the Town, which he made a year later. Sorry again about the email. I should be muting those, but I don't know how to do that yet, so you have to bear with me. Garland was just 25 years old when she made this movie. She was a little intimidated by Fred in the beginning because he was almost 50. And somebody asked me when we did our last Q&A whether Fred Astaire ever danced with women his own age. I looked it up. I thought I knew the answer, and actually I did, but I wanted to double check. The only time he danced with a woman, a girl actually, his age, was when he was teamed with his sister Adele, who was 1 year older than Fred Astaire was. In all the other cases, they were younger, and they were usually much younger. Ginger Rogers was 12 years younger than Fred. When they were working together, Jane Powell was 30 years younger. So was Audrey Hepburn, and Leslie Caron in Daddy Longlegs was 32 years younger than Fred Astaire. But you know, it never really seemed to bother people. I mean, welcome to Hollywood, that happened all the time. We don't quite approve of it now. But the thing about Fred Astaire is he was such a gentleman that there's never anything offensive about it. And for that matter, at the end of the film, watch how Judy Garland takes control. No question about that. But, you know, this was not supposed to be a Fred Astaire movie. It was Gene Kelly who was signed to play opposite Judy Garland, but he broke his ankle just before rehearsals were to start. He claimed, when he reported to the studio, that he broke his ankle rehearsing one of the numbers, but in fact he was fibbing because he broke his ankle playing touch football with his son out in the backyard. Anyway, Gene Kelly was off the picture. Arthur Freed, the producer, called Fred Astaire, who was technically in retirement at that time, vowed not to do another movie after Blue Skies in 1946, but the chance to work with Judy Garland proved irresistible, and Fred signed on, even though, as he said, quote, I'm afraid the old joints will stiffen up. But he wound up dancing in movies and on television for the next 20 years, all the way up through Finian's Rainbow in 1968. So he need not have worried. Yes, the dancing is sensational. We know that that's going to be the case. There are two what Astaire used to call um, trick numbers. One is Drum Crazy, which comes in the beginning of the film. And Fred is playing not only the drums, but a whole panoply of percussion instruments, ranging from big drums to little toy drums. And he has a little boy doing the routine with him, and that's kind of irresistible. The legendary number in this picture is, of course, Steppin' Out With My Baby. Legendary because he dances part of it in slow motion while the dancing ensemble in the back perform it at full tilt. And nobody had ever tried this before. It took the technicians weeks to figure out how to synchronize everything so that it would be impeccable. And because it was an Astaire picture, it had to be impeccable. So it was. I have a request. I hope you'll honor it. We all know that Fred Astaire was one of the great dancers in America ever. But he's not given the credit that he's due for being a singer. And a lot of us think that he was one of the great American popular singers in addition to his dancing gifts. So watch the movie this time around with that in mind. He had a light voice that didn't have much of a range, but singers like Sinatra and Mel Torme always said that Fred Astaire was a big influence on their own work. And just when you have a chance to witness the nuance and the subtlety and the phrasing in the vocal performances, you'll see what I mean. It was a marvel. This film moves so fast, thanks not only to Robert Alton, who was the choreographer and one of the best in the business back then, but also to the director, whose name was Charles Walters. Not a household name at MGM, as were Vincent Minnelli and Stanley Donen, but Charles Walters was much more than a journeyman director. He had been a former dancer and former choreographer, so he really knew those crafts. But in addition, he had this incredible sense of overall movement and pacing. And this movie is paced like nobody's business. There's 17 musical numbers in it, but also a fair amount of dialogue. But Charles Walters brings it in at 110 minutes. Woo! It's quite an accomplishment. He filmed it, by the way, in just 10 weeks. One miscellaneous note, just in case you don't know the word rotogravure. I mean, we all sing it because we have to. If we're singing Easter Parade, it appears at the end of the song. But rotogravure is an important word of its era. In the old days, newspapers, of course, were only printed in black and white. But there was such a thing called a rotogravure magazine that appeared. My telephone, for heaven's sake, forget it. The rotogravure magazine appeared in the Sunday paper in New York, and it was spectacular because it was in color and because it was a fashion magazine. And as you'll also learn when you watch this movie for the 14th time, magazines were really big in America during this era. Most people subscribe to 5 or 6 of them, and you'll see magazine covers used in a spectacular fashion in one of the routines. So that's rotogravure. And that takes me to the end of what I wanted to say about this. I just want to add, it's time for you to get ready to have A+ fun with Easter Parade. But just one other thing. Unlike Royal Wedding, which I do like a lot, Easter Parade really has heart. So, as we say at the Musical Theater Project, learn, laugh, cry, and love. It's all in this movie of 110 minutes, 1948. I hope you watch it at your convenience, and then I hope you join us for our next Q&A. It'll all be about Easter Parade, and it'll be held on Friday, April 17 at 7 p.m. online. Friday, April 17, 7 p.m., a live stream for our Q&A. I'm Bill Rudman from the Musical Theater Project, and I'm so happy you were able to join me, especially for this, can I use the word? Masterpiece.